Good evening, short story writers. Tonight's short story inspiration comes from the news, and the news in particular was that Ivanka Trump ditched Donald Trump's hand in order to hold down her skirt while she was getting off the plane Air Force One. And that's perfectly understandable, but some of the press are saying, oh, no, she just doesn't want to be with Donald Trump, which, I don't know. The divorce laws are such that if that were the case, she'd end up a very wealthy lady with pretty much no downside whatsoever. So, I'm not a Trump fan by any means, but don't read things into situations that aren't necessarily there. It was high up, it was windy, and she wanted to hold her modesty in place, then that's a much more plausible explanation than in public she suddenly didn't want to be seen holding his hand. She's not the royal family, our royal family. So, the short story prompt is, I want you to do a bit of method acting here. I want you to go back into your past at some time and think of a situation which either involved you or which you witnessed where an action was misinterpreted, perhaps innocently, perhaps deliberately, and this led to some sort of misunderstanding. Then you will adapt that situation and you will turn it into, the misinterpretation will be like in romantic comedies or in Shakespeare, where you overhear something and then you or your protagonist or the adversary, if there is one, assumes the worst and acts upon the worst possible interpretation without asking. And this is a common gripe in stories of mine, that a lot of the plot line could be sorted out by saying, excuse me, what exactly do you mean by that, rather than just assuming stuff. So that is your story prompt. How can it be used? Well, I can see a use for it in literary fiction, because this kind of thing happens quite a lot in real life, particularly amongst people who like melodrama. Crime, mystery, thrillers. Yes, somebody gets wrongly framed for a situation that they happen to be around. North by Northwest being a case in point, a bit extreme. He pulls the dagger out of the body and then somebody photographs him. Roger Kaplan, I think his name is. Comedy, well, North by Northwest is fairly comedic, so do with that what you will. Literally, we've done romance, stuff of romances, the plot to drive a wedge between the hero and the heroine when all is going well. A misunderstanding. Oh, his girlfriend's turned up. Oh no. Oh, and it turns out to be his sister or his cousin or his young-looking mum or something, and or vice versa. It could be her brother. Whatever, anyway. Rather than just saying, so who was that person? Oh no, it must be an ex-lover. We need to progress the plot in this way. You got permission to do it now. Shouldn't do it in your own stuff. Find something a bit more plausible. Crime, mystery, thriller, historical, misunderstandings. I can think of one, but it's exceptionally tragic. I'm not going to go into it. Just imagine there's some sort of two sides at war, and they're about to cause a truce, and then maybe there's an explosion and somebody assumes that a shot has been fired, so everybody starts killing each other. History's about wars, quite often. Politics, ditto. Somebody says something which is open to misinterpretation. They don't choose their words very well, and their political enemies gather around and start plotting against them. suppose in some ways that might be the story of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. In some ways. Surreal, sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. A misinterpreted situation leads to, well, in sci-fi, a discovery. The scientist in the lab assumes one thing, and in fact it's not the finding at all, but because this has been done, this was done with a theorem, not with Stephen Hawking, but with somebody else. He fell asleep in class, everybody left, and the professor put up some sort of a unsolvable theory or theorem or whatever, and the guy woke up, assumed it was homework, went away and did it, presented his findings, but in fact the rest of the class hadn't even tried, and the professor, what, how did you do this? And he'd solved some very old conundrum. So it does happen within science fiction. And the same thing could be used in a fantasy, slipstream, surreal or horror situation, but without having to go into the actual details to provoke a chain of events which end in the situation of your choice. Biographical, not too sure about that, but sure there must be some basis for biographical fiction where somebody feels that they've been challenged to do something and in fact they got it wrong, but they went ahead and began a retail empire or something like that. Okay, 7 minutes, that will do for today. So that is your short story writing prompt for today. Situation which is open to interpretation, and people jump to the totally wrong conclusion rather than the more sensible one. All right. Happy story writing. Good night.